Alright guys, so this is part 2 of my talk, of my seminar series. Part 1 was 2 weeks ago, just before the break. Part 1 was called Getting Things Done 2049, which is a Blade Runner reference, and alludes to the fact that the world we're dealing with is getting more and more complex, and we need better systems to handle it. Today's talk is called How to Keep Getting Things Done. It should be hopefully a little bit shorter than the first talk, and what it's really about is refining the system that we already have in place. I'm going to revise that system as well if you don't know how that system works. If you weren't here for the first talk, I'm going to refine the system that we already have in place, and then I'm going to add one more step to that system. And the purpose of that step is to deal with how most productivity or task management systems break down, right? Because we all start out using these things with the best of intentions, and then over time they sort of fade into disuse, and we want to deal with that today. So this is about how to keep getting things done. The very first thing I just want to say here is most of this course content is from 2 online courses by Forte Labs, Getting Stuff Done Like a Boss and Building a Second Brain, which ACQuFRR sponsored my attendance. So I'm reporting that content back to ACQuFRR. Thank you very much for David for making that happen. I'm also drawing from some work done by JD Mayer, who's a software developer, or used to be a software developer at Microsoft, and his book, Getting Results the Agile Way. Of course, the whole Getting Things Done is actually a trademark name. GTD is a trademark name by David Allen, which has been around for 30 or 40 years.
Is it JD Mayer?
Yeah, JD Mayer.
Seem to have spelled his name incorrectly.
Mayer, is that an owl? It's just a very pixelated eye with a dot.
Oh.
Yeah. And then you're going to see some custom icons that I pulled from Flat Icon, and then this presentation template is modified from a presentation template that you can find for free online from Slide Forest. So, before we jump right in, what I'd like to do is collect the homework from
Oh, shit.
So, what we're going to do is we're going to follow the same steps that we followed last time. So I'm going to present an abstract model, abstract task management model that we can all load in. Then we're going to move to the concrete software that we're actually going to use. Then we're going to talk about the implementation. Just like before, if you forget everything else, I'm going to try and present 2 central ideas. And I'm going to present the same 2 central ideas that you saw before, so you really should get them after this one. And then if you're awake all the way till the end, we'll do 1 more central idea. So if you can remember 3 things, maybe write them down. Alright, let's jump right into the abstract model. So this is the abstract model, the way we want to think about getting things done. At the top here, we have the entire world, the entire sensory world, everything that is outside you, depending on how Buddhist you are. Alright? And that consists of all possible inputs, everything that could possibly occur, and I represent that using a meteor, a bear riding a bicycle, and a forest on fire, because the world is an unpredictable and scary place. Now, some subset...
Did you hear about the guy who was killed by the bear that fell on his car?
No.
In America, yeah. A bear fell on his car, he was killed, and then the bear ran away.
So that really lends credence to this whole, the way we describe the world. Some subset of all the possible inputs are going to arrive at our inboxes. And what our inboxes just are, at this stage, is they're just abstract containers that hold things for us that we need to process. And an example of an inbox that you'll all have is an email inbox. It's holding a bunch of stuff that came from the outside world that you need to process. So our inboxes are going to contain things that other people put there, or things that we put there. From our inboxes, things are going to go into our system, right? Our system is going to be called the para system. Our system is going to process the content of our inboxes, and that's going to give rise to the next best task that we should do. The number 1 thing that we should do next. So this is our abstract model. What our abstract model achieves, right off the bat, is that it separates out these steps. So on the right-hand side there, I've gone a little bit more detailed into the abstract model, and you can see the 3 steps of our system. We have a collect step, a process step, and a do step. And even if you just separate out these steps, you've already made progress. Because what a lot of people get wrong is the collect, process, and do steps get sort of intermingled. So you get some emails, you read some of them, you leave some of them unread, you process one of them, you come back and check another one a little bit later. We want to separate that out. We're going to do all our collection at once, all our processing at once, and then we're going to start doing our tasks for the day. The complexity of this entire system is going to be captured in 1 note. You're going to make 1 little note. It's going to be your daily checklist. And if you follow that daily checklist, if you do every task on that daily checklist, you're going to have correctly implemented the entire system. I've got this icon over here. That's the Microsoft Sticky Notes icon. My daily checklist is a sticky note that sits on my desktop. So when I boot up my desktop, I see my daily checklist. So our entire 3-step system is going to be governed by this daily checklist. Don't remember any of the steps in the system. They appear on your checklist. The point here is to not remember things. This system, this para system, right, which is our central organizational system, is going to reside in 3 applications. So let's quickly talk about what the para system means. And this is just a revision for those of you who did this with me 2 weeks ago. But the para system is going to be a single organizational system that we use across context. So regardless of what application I'm working on, or working in, and regardless of which context I'm in, whether I'm at work, whether I'm at home, whether I'm on the road, whether I'm traveling just with my laptop or just with my phone, I want to be facing the same organizational system the whole time. Everything is sorted in the same way. Right now, these are abstract categories, but you can think about them as folders. You can think about them as folders on your computer. So the one folder that we're going to have is projects, and projects is going to have a series of subfolders that represent each project that we're currently working on. Now, a project has a strict definition. It is a series of tasks that has a goal and a deadline. If it doesn't have a goal and a deadline, it's not a project. When you're constructing projects, when you're choosing projects to work on, you need to identify your goal and your deadline. Areas are not like projects. So you're going to have an areas folder, it's going to have subfolders that contain areas. Areas are roles or spheres of activity with standards to be maintained over time. So areas don't end. Projects end and they get archived, right? Area is something, for instance me, I have an area as a researcher. Research gives rise to a lot of projects that I work on over time, but research is also an area that I need to maintain. I need to read papers at a regular interval. I need to communicate with other researchers at a regular interval. That stuff never finishes, but it's part of my role or sphere of responsibility. A big problem that you can have, and this is central idea number 1 that you must take away, is the distinction between projects and areas. You're going to have great difficulty if you confuse the two in deciding what your actual responsibilities are. So, I recently got married, right? Being a husband is an area of responsibility, not a project. So I can't just check into my marriage, get it done, and archive it. It's an ongoing series of things that I need to do. Okay.
Well, it's got till death do us part.
Right. Yeah. There's a built-in cap T to the entire system.
Definitely a cap T.
There's a random stopping time at some point in the future. These are our 2 active folders in the sense
what
that...
do you do with stuff that's hanging?
Give me an example.
Well, very often I've got a folder that's called pending, just because that's the name it ended up with. So I do something, and then I'm waiting.
Yes, and that's something we didn't cover in the first talk.
And sometimes it's not an area, it's not a maintenance thing, and it's not even really a project.
It's just a task.
It's just a task.
Yeah.
Or it's highly dependent on what comes back.
Yeah. And
So
that's a little modification or refinement we have to make to our current system. Right?
Okay.
So I'm going to put a step in our processing which specifically deals with people who have responsibility over other people and can give them jobs or wait for things to come back. Yeah, I'm going to talk about that. So right now we've got these 2 actionable folders. They're in black. These folders contain things that relate to tasks, things that I have to do. I have 2 folders that don't directly give rise to actions: resources and archives. Resources is anything that's not connected to a project or an area, but stuff that I'm interested in, right? I like comic books. When I find interesting articles about comic books, find interesting comics that I want to read, those go into my resources. I collect information about them. That's why I know that Bill Watterson never does interviews, right? This is a fascinating thing to know. So that's sitting around in my resources folder. The archive folder is where things move when you're done with them. If you lose interest in an area, something that was residing in your resources folder, like photography, you decide to no longer pursue that interest, it moves into the archive. You finish a project, it moves into the archive. If your responsibilities change, you change jobs for instance, and the roles that you're supposed to maintain differ, now you can move them into your archive. The reason these things don't get deleted, but instead go into your archive, is so that in the future you can call upon the knowledge of your previous role or resource. So in a couple of years, maybe you have to interview for a position that you used to do. That responsibility has been archived, that area of responsibility has been archived. You can pull up that archive, which is filled with notes that you took in meetings, emails that were sent to you, references that you collected related to that job. And then when you interview for that position, you can tell people, well, this is what it looks like to do that on a day-to-day basis. So that's the para system. Now I want to show you guys, keeping in mind these abstract steps, I want to show you guys what the Para system and these 3 steps look like when they're implemented in software, right? So I've highlighted the 3 pieces of software in which the Para system reside for us, the organizational system. Here I've got Google Drive, there I've got Todoist, and there I've got Evernote. I'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. So, Todoist, Evernote, Google Drive. In these 3 applications, I represent the Para system. So, in my Todoist, I have an inbox, which sits over there. I have projects over there. These projects have sub-projects. That's just my projects folder. They've got projects inside them. I have areas. I have archives. What I don't have in here is resources, because resources tend to be files, right? So files don't go in my task manager. I do have this extra special folder called Someday Maybe, which I'll talk about when we get to processing inboxes. In Evernote, Evernote doesn't have folders, it has notebooks. So here I have an inbox notebook, I have a projects notebook, areas notebook, a resources notebook, and an archive notebook. Google Drive has folders. I have an inbox folder, a projects folder, areas folder, a resources folder, and an archive folder. Gmail, another application that's of central importance to us here, is just an inbox. I don't sort any email in Gmail. Those emails get sorted when they move into my system. So in Gmail, I just have an inbox. Google Drive has an inbox, Evernote has an inbox, and Todoist has an inbox. I want to mention here that Todoist is our primary application. So if you don't implement the rest of the system, but you start keeping a task list divided into the Para system, you're going to do fairly well. Also, your primary project list is always in Todoist. Something is not a project unless it has tasks. And if it has tasks, it's in Todoist because that's your task manager, right? But a project doesn't necessarily have notes associated with it. A project doesn't necessarily have files associated with it. A project can be a fairly simple thing, small thing that's going to take you 3 days to do. If it has notes associated with it, or websites or references, then that project will have a folder in Evernote. If it has files associated with it, then that project will have a folder in Google Drive. So projects always appear in Todoist, but they don't necessarily have to have corresponding folders. However, nothing will have a folder that doesn't have a task in Todoist. Todoist is our primary interface.
Do all those things speak to each other?
Yes.
So you can just drag things?
Shuffle them around. And I'm going to talk about how things arrive in the different folders on the, not the next slide, 2 slides from now. How do things actually arrive in these different containers? And how do they get processed? What I do want to say now is we have to have one place that's our primary interface. Because if I ask you, what's on your plate right now? What you do is you go to Todoist and you click on projects. And the list of projects that appear there, those are the projects that you are actively working on. Done. You don't need to look anywhere else to tell me how busy you are. You don't need to go look at your calendar, you don't need to open different notes, remember that email that someone sent you about those projects or what you're currently trying to get done. They sit in the Todoist folder. Our entire system is now residing in those 4 applications. And we're going to show how those applications are used on the very next slide. Now, I've written down the purpose here next to the applications so that you can remember these are the applications that I recommend. I have an iPhone and I have a Windows machine. So what I need is I need applications that run on the Windows machine and on the iPhone. You are constrained by whatever operating system you're using, but there are equivalent applications that do all of these functions. You can use Microsoft OneDrive for your cloud storage, you can use Microsoft Outlook for your email, you don't have to use Evernote, you can use Google Keep. For instance, it performs the same function. And a Mac has its own Todoist app as well. And I just keep forgetting what it's called. I think it's called List. Mac has a built-in one that you can use to do the same thing. For each step of our 3-step process, in the previous presentation, I devoted multiple slides to each step, and we covered all of them in detail. In this presentation, I really only want to focus on the process step, because that's what we're going to refine. How do we move things from our inboxes? That's what we're going to work on in this presentation, before we add the secret step 4, that's going to keep our productivity system running. But I do want to go back over the 3 central ideas of each step. So in the collect step, the first rule of the collect step is every open loop must be captured in an inbox. That's that rule over here. As soon as something pops into your head, any task or any open loop, an open loop is anything that you're trying to remember. Whether it's something that you're trying to remember to do, or just something that you're trying to remember. Anything. Commit that to an inbox immediately. That's central idea number 2. So central idea number 1 was, we distinguish between projects and areas. Central idea number 2 is, don't remember anything. You're a fallible being, right? You're flesh and blood, things are going to happen, you're going to forget stuff. If you don't implement the system, but you still implement central idea 2 by writing everything down, you're already going to do much better. So the first rule of capturing open loops is that every open loop must be captured in an inbox. If there are any leaks, you can't trust the system. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more, because the system will degrade if you're not confident that everything is captured. If you're thinking, oh, but I really have to remember that, you're going to stop doing what you need to do to keep the system running. So I'm going to talk about that. Second one here is having as few inboxes as possible. Right? Right now we have 4, right? When I show you my daily checklist, you're going to see that I actually have 5. And I could probably do with only having 4, and I'll show you why I have 5 and why I think that's suitable to me, but you want to process as few inboxes as you have to. And the last one is empty your inboxes daily. This collect, process, do step, right? That process has to be done at least once a day. I have not yet needed to do it more than once a day. Turns out most people are willing to wait 24 hours for an email. Turns out that's sort of okay. So I do my daily checklist once a day, first thing in the morning. We're going to cover that in detail. Those are the 3 rules for capturing open loops. When you process an inbox, you also have 3 rules. Whether you're processing your Gmail inbox, your Evernote inbox, your Google Drive inbox, or your Todoist inbox. The first rule is, you have to process it from top to bottom. Don't jump around. Some things are going to jump out at you, like you should do them immediately, I should process that one. Yeah.
Wouldn't it be bottom to top?
No, this is a...
So I got 4 emails today, and the earliest one gave me something to do, and the other 3 did it for me.
Yes, but those emails, the order in which they arrived in, don't necessarily speak to priority.
Sure.
Right? So that's why at this stage, we haven't decided on priority at all. That happens later. So at this stage, we don't jump. Whatever is there top to bottom, and they're all going to get processed here. Every inbox is going to be empty when we're done. So it doesn't matter which I do first. So to simplify the mental burden, just top to bottom. Done. Process each item one at a time, no leaving anything for later. So what that means is, when you're done processing an inbox, for instance your Gmail inbox, when you're done, it must be empty. Not grey, red, it must be empty. 0 inbox, there must be nothing left. When your Evernote inbox is processed, it must be empty. When your Todoist inbox is processed, it must be empty. So at least once a day, you're going to have that blissful zen calm of having 0 inbox. Right? It's magical. It's better than meditation. And then number 3, never put anything back in the same inbox. And what that means is, from my Gmail, I'm going to push things to other inboxes and then process them next. But I can't push things back. Okay. Makes sense? It's got to go to the next inbox because eventually all the inboxes need to be empty. That doesn't mean they stay empty. Once I've done my daily checklist, maybe someone walks into my office and asks me for something, well, that goes in my Todoist immediately. Now that inbox has something in it. But I don't look at that inbox again until the next day. I'm not concerned with that until the next day. And then last 3 on the do step.
Unless it's me and I'm saying.
Yeah, then it has to happen, and then it just changes priority. So about that. The last step is on the do step. Once we have finished processing our Todoist inbox, which is the last inbox that we process, we're going to do these 3 things. We're going to open up the things we've selected to do today, which is the last step of processing our Todoist inbox. I'll talk about that when we go through the checklist again. And you're going to pick which 3 of the 20 tasks that you have to do are going to have the biggest value impact. You decide that at the start of the day. And you move them to the top of your list. And then you start. Because, should David come into your office and say you have to do this other thing first, you'll be glad that you started working on the important things. You didn't start with the easy things. Because then maybe you only get 3 things out of your 20 things done, but you got the 3 most important things done. So before we start our day, we prioritize. Right. I'm not going to cover step 1 and step 3 in detail here. I did it in the previous presentation. The talk is up on YouTube. The slides are available for anyone who wants them. I am going to focus on the processing and inbox step. Yeah.
Just a quick question. So I understand like your inbox and to-dos would be like, oh, go buy food or something like that, right? What would be an example of an item that goes in the inbox of, let's say, Evernote?
Yeah, I'm gonna talk about that on the next slide. It's a perfect question. How do things arrive in these inboxes? Todoist is obvious, Gmail is obvious, Evernote's not so obvious, right? And Google Storage, Google Drive, not so obvious. I'm going to focus on step 2. So this is all still revision, right? But I do want to mention now, this is how we process an inbox. I want to start right at the top here with our 3 inboxes and talk about how things arrive in them. So things arrive in our Gmail inbox or our email inbox in the standard way. People send us email. How do things arrive in my Google Drive inbox? I accumulate files. That's how things arrive there. I download something. I don't have to go look and find where I am downloading that thing to. I download it into my inbox. Maybe it's an application that I'm going to install. That just goes in my inbox. Maybe someone sends me a photo that I want to save. It goes in my inbox. Maybe I take a photo or a video with my phone. Well, that can go straight to my inbox. When I take the video, it can be saved in my Google Drive. I can set that up as my default storage for all this stuff. So files that arrive at me can happen in many different ways. I download an academic paper off the internet. That goes to my Google Drive inbox. Those are files that empty into that inbox.
So what happens like things like someone sends you an email which has a document, do you put that in the Gmail inbox or do you?
No. When that happens and that document, is the document actionable or not? That's the question. And we're going to do that on the next step over there. Okay, so someone sends me a file. What happens to it? Well, I'm processing that email when I process email. So I'm going to talk about that inbox first. Right. Google Drive, files come to me, or I collect files, they go into Google Drive, either at this stage or in my inbox. Evernote, most of the things that arrive in my Evernote inbox are web pages that I save. Evernote has a nice web clipper plugin. I arrive at a web page that I'd like to read but don't have time to read, or I arrive at a web page that describes a project that I'd like to do at some stage. Right? It has references for that project. I right click and I say save to Evernote. That goes offline into my Evernote inbox. Another thing for things that appear in my Evernote inbox is any notes that I take. If I'm in a meeting, I don't take those notes in some email or some loose document. I take them in the area, right? Well, they're going to be associated with the area or with the project that those notes relate to. So all those notes that I take by hand go in my Evernote inbox. When I was preparing this presentation, I made a bunch of notes about what I want to say. At the start, those notes just go in my Evernote inbox. When that inbox gets processed, it's going to move into the project. Right? And this is so that when you have a work meeting and someone says, well, who has the minutes from last week's meeting? You go, well, what project are we talking about? Or is this research or teaching meeting? Cool, I'll just put up the inbox, find the notes. There's no other place it can be. Because my organizational system is constant. Yeah?
So does this mean like if we ever take notes, it should always be like electronic, or should we just like take pictures of like handwritten notes?
Both of those things are perfectly okay. Evernote the Evernote app on your phone, you can say create note from photo, click, and it goes into your Evernote, no problem. And I think Google Keep has the same functionality. Because I do a lot of math, right? I don't like doing math electronically, it's a hassle, so I do it all, and then I take a photo. And trust me, it's so much better than using your notebook. Okay, this is all backed up on the cloud. You can go recover that math if you need to and type it into data. So that's how things arrive at our inbox. Our inbox has a hierarchy. We always process the Gmail inbox first. You can then process either of these two, it's up to you. And once all 3 of these inboxes are done, then I start with my Todoist inbox. That's the big one. Okay, I get an email. The email has a file attachment. It may have references. The first question I ask myself is this email actionable? Does it have a task associated with it, or is it not actionable? That's the first question. If it's actionable, I click on the Todoist plugin and I say send email to Todoist. That whole email link is going to appear in my Todoist as a task. I archive the email, and later on when I process my Todoist inbox, I can decide what to do. If that email is not actionable, first, maybe just delete it, right? You don't have to accumulate the stuff. But if that email is not actionable, but it contains files that you want to keep, you save those files to your Google Drive inbox. If the email contains information you want to keep but not files, you forward that email to your Evernote inbox. Evernote has an email address. I just go forward. I have added that email address as reference in my contacts. So I just go forward to reference. Then I've got that email forever in my notes, in my organizational system. So when I'm done processing my Gmail, things have been pushed to my Todoist inbox, or my Evernote inbox, or my Google Drive inbox. Processing the Google Drive inbox and the Todoist inbox, the Google Drive inbox and the Evernote inbox are straightforward. Right? First thing you ask yourself is it actionable? Did I mess up by putting it here? Is it actually connected to a task? If it's connected to a task, well, it has to go to Todoist. If it's not connected to a task, I move it to the project, area, or resource notebook or folder to which it belongs. Now I have it where I want it, and those inboxes are processed. The Todoist inbox is the one in which we spend most of our time. In the morning, we spend most of our time setting up our tasks for the day. Okay. First question is, does it take less than 2 minutes? This item, this task that I've written into Todoist. If it takes less than 2 minutes, just do it now. Just do it. Send that email you want to send that WhatsApp you want to send, Google when that film came out that you keep thinking about what year was it because you lost the trivia argument the previous night. Do all of that quickly. Okay. If it doesn't take less than 2 minutes, well then in Todoist, you're going to move it into its corresponding project or area, or it's just an idea, something that you'd like to do someday. To train a Rottweiler to rescue beavers. It's just something that you want to do. That goes into the someday maybe folder. I don't want those things floating around, these vague, half-formed things that I might eventually want to do, so that stuff all goes into someday maybe. I think I have 200 things in there. It's just like random things that occurred to me. So they go into someday/maybe is what this folder is called. The next question is the important one. Should I do this task as soon as I can? If the answer is yes, I give this task the special label next. It's the next thing to do. If the answer is no, I tag it with a time frame. Time frame is not quite the same thing as a due date. A time frame is just, when do I want this task to resurface? I might not do it then, it might get tagged again. I'm going to process it, but when do I want this task to bubble back up? I don't want to see it every day, this thing that I've decided not to do yet. So what's really great about Todoist is it has context for how you type. So you can go next week, and it'll pop up again Monday of the next week. You can go 2 months from now, and it'll pop up 2 months from now on the first day of that month. So you can process that later. What I want to do here is the first new thing that we're going to see in this presentation. Of course, if you didn't see the whole presentation, this is all blowing your mind. But the first new thing that we're going to do in this presentation is add 2 steps, optional steps, that I think are important but optional, to this inbox processing. The first step that I'm going to add to this inbox processing is this idea of write as next physical action. We've spoken about this before, but I want to emphasize it again. When I take a task to my Todoist inbox, my goal is to write it as the next physical thing I have to do. A very bad example, the same example that I used last time, is organize bookshelf. That's a verb, it's a task, but it doesn't actually tell me anything. It doesn't tell me what to do. Organize it how? Using what system? Am I throwing anything out? So always write your task as the next physical thing. This can seem very silly because doing that thing might take less time than it took you to decide what that thing was. It could very well be. For instance, Google how to organize bookshelves. But when you have a project that has tasks in it that actually tell you what to do, you break a lot of the inertia from working on that project. And when you pick your next physical action, lay the stones as close together as possible. Make the task seem silly. So easy that you don't need to write it down. And then you'll build momentum on your projects. So my first advice is, when you push something into Todoist, take a moment and go, can I write this better? One of our 3 questions, right? What am I trying to say? Does this say it? Can I say it slightly better when I write the next physical action? The other step that I want to throw in here, part of our 3 pillars in the previous talk was this idea that the things we want to spend our time on are the things that are unique to us, things that we are uniquely suited to doing, either our special talents or things that we have a history of. I should be giving the seminar because I attended the course, right? No one else in the room is as well suited to give the seminar because they haven't attended the course. What you have to do is check, when you have a task in your to-do list, can I outsource this task? And the rule for that is there someone who can do it 80% as well as I can? Not 100%, but 80%. That probably means that it's sufficiently in their domain, or sphere of responsibility, that you can give the task to them. So that step happens. If it's less than 2 minutes, just do it, even if it's not your responsibility. Just do it. If it's more than 2 minutes, ask yourself, is there someone else this should go to? Can they do it 80% as well as I do? If they can, you send it to them and you tag the task. The task doesn't disappear, it becomes a waiting task, which is our new tag over here. Just like Nest, we now have a waiting.
Pending.
Yeah, there I go. Waiting, pending is perfectly good. And then it will disappear.
You might want to change that sentence or have a slash. Should I be doing this?
Yeah, that's perfectly good. I don't make decisions like that, but people higher up in an organization probably can, right? Is this worth doing by me?
And the brutal one is, does this have anything to do with me?
Yeah, very much. So now we have this new tag that we've introduced, the waiting tag, but it's cleared our inbox. Okay, we're going to come back to this waiting tag later. This is all of the complexity in our system, but we don't remember any of that. All we do is have a note on our desktop. Every morning we fire up that note and we do each instruction from the top to the bottom. That's it. What I want to point out about this note, and this is the actual one that I have on my desktop, is that it contains our 3 steps: collect, process, and do. And the only things that have changed here is, I wonder if I actually say that over here, the only thing that's changed here is, should I delegate it? Forward is in tag waiting. It wasn't on our list for the previous one, and that's really for people who can outsource responsibility. You have a team, send it over to the team. Now, excuse me. On any given day, to make the system work, my productivity system work, all I have to do is go through my daily checklist. But I have to do it every day, and I can't skip things on this checklist. On this checklist, I'll give an example, is this collect calendar open loops plus minus 2 days. Look back and forward 2 days for any lingering open loops and enter them into Todoist. So Friday morning, going through my daily checklist, but I have a lot to do Friday morning. So I think, no, I know, next week I've got a lecture on Monday, I've got a seminar on Tuesday, I don't need to go to my calendar. So of course, Monday morning, when I have a bit more breathing space, and I go, I probably shouldn't have skipped that step on Friday, let me just go check my calendar. I realized that I told Alex I teach his jiu-jitsu class while he's away, and I actually have to teach a class tonight on Thursday. And I missed that because I didn't do everything on the checklist. If you have a checklist, you have to do everything on the checklist. And right at the end, we're going to talk a little bit about tricks to get yourself to do everything on the checklist. Good? Now, this is all great. We've added these 2 additional processing steps, but now I want to talk about what this presentation is really about, which is what we're going to call the skeleton key of productivity systems, which is the weekly review. Now I know that that doesn't seem like a massive tool, but trust me when I say that the ability to do the weekly review is going to make or break whether you stick with the system or not. That's it. Our weekly review has to do 3 things. The first thing that it has to do is it has to reinforce our trust in the system. If you're like me, and you're a fairly high-strung person, and then for many, many years, you've juggled in your mind your various responsibilities and tasks, right? Now you've taken that strain out of your mind and you've put it into the system. But your mind rebels at that. I want to worry about stuff. I'm in the habit of worrying about things. So over time, what tends to happen is I tend to try and remember stuff. Someone said this, I'm like, no, I'll enter that into Todoist later. I don't have to do it now. Or, I'll remember to do that. When you do that, cracks start to appear in the system. And when your trust breaks down that everything is in the system, you eventually abandon it. So once a week, we're going to make sure that all that stupid stuff you convinced yourself to try and remember, that goes into your system. The other thing here is to elevate perspective. Your daily checklist and your weekly review even might look slightly different to mine. The applications that you use might be different to the applications that I use. Some of those may work well, or they may not. It is very hard when you're fulfilling your daily responsibilities, busy with the grind, to see what's working and what's not working. You have to take a step back. So this organizational thinking, or changing the system in which you function, right, can't happen while you're busy with it. It has to happen ahead of time. So once a week, you're going to separate yourself from the stuff that you have to do and think about how you're doing things. We have to elevate perspective. And the last one here is reorient yourself. So the saddest possible outcome for implementing this system is that you vastly increase your productivity on things you don't care about. That would be the worst possible way. You do more of the stuff that you don't want to do. I've written here, humans are aiming creatures, right? What you want to be doing is aiming at something. It doesn't have to be a goal, but just oriented in some way. Now for most of us, the bare minimum of that is, I'm going to orient myself away from being a bad person, hurting other people. That's the bare minimum, right? I'm just going to orient myself away from that. And if you do that, well, you tend to be oriented in the good general direction. Now, when you get once a week, you have to ask yourself, am I still oriented in that direction? Even if I'm not aiming at something, am I at least pointed away from harming the people around me? From being a clog in the educational system that I'm a part of? From slowing down the productivity of the people around me? Am I at least pointing away from that? So, these three things have to be followed by our weekly review. Right? The weekly review takes time. I'll talk about how much time on the next slide. And again, when I get to my weekly review, that's not when I want to decide what my weekly review looks like. I want to decide that ahead of time. And then when I get to my weekly review, I just go through it, checklist by checklist, item by item, out skipping items from start to finish. One of the items is going to be, well, should I update my weekly review? Is the system working or not working? I'm going to contrast the weekly review with our daily checklist. So that's like that. I know there's a lot going on. The first point that I just want to make is on our daily checklist, we have our 3 steps. Collect, process, do. 3 steps. But now in our weekly review, we still have a collect step, but we have the new 4th hidden step, the skeleton key of productivity systems, review. Almost everything on my weekly review does just that. It reviews what happened the past week. I have the same initial step. Is there anything I should have entered in an inbox and I haven't done? Let's do that. I have a second step that looks very similar to collect calendar open loops, but these go for more weeks. So I look back 2 weeks over my calendar, I do a quick scan, did I miss anything? And then I look ahead 4 weeks. Because on a 4-week time scale, I might not just see tasks, I might see projects. I might go, man, I really should get this project done, or I really should add this project. This is the place where new projects go into Todoist. So far we haven't spoken about that. This is when new projects get upgraded into Todoist at the end of the week. At this point, I go into my Todoist and I type in the tag waiting. What is still pending? What is outstanding? Do I need to follow up? Happens once a week. It doesn't have to happen every day for most people. Most people you can wait a week, check in on someone. Here, I review my project list in Todoist, Evernote, and Google Drive. What this means is, probably when I finish the project, I archived it from Todoist, but maybe I didn't go clean up the folders in Google Drive and in Evernote. I do that over here. Or the other way around. Someone sent me some files, and I'm like, that's a great idea for a project. Let's create a project folder to save those files, but I never actually initiated any tasks on that project. Now's the time to make sure that your project lists are consistent. But here's also the very special step. Just like every day we pick 3 things to focus on, every week we're going to pick 3 projects. In Evernote and in Google Drive, projects are sorted alphabetically. But in Todoist, you can drag your projects around. So what you're going to do here is you're going to drag 3 projects to the top of that list. So that the next week when you're choosing tasks, you'll have this visual reminder that, no wait, I actually decided that tasks on that project are more important than tasks on that project. And you do that once a week. The things in blue here are things that are unique to me. You may not need to do them. Once a week I do a review of my finances. This is from the days when I was a PhD student, master student, you had to make every week sort of work. Now I could probably go down to once a month to review my finances. I also review my productivity system, what parts are working, what parts are not working. I make some notes in the productivity area in my Evernote. Make notes. I have a personal finance area of responsibility. That's where my notes go when I review my finances. So at the end of the year, I have these weekly or monthly little indexes of what was happening in my finances at each time. This is not an optional step. I highly recommend everyone do it. This review step is you dream up things that you could potentially do and you dump it in someday maybe. I apologize here. No, sorry, I'm talking about the next. I don't have to apologize. So you think of things that you would like to do. Ask yourself, what if UCT closed next week? There was nothing to do. They told us they're going to pay our salaries, but you can't come in. What would you do? Dump some of that stuff into someday maybe. Sometime when you have time, you go look at something maybe and you go, all right, that was a great idea, let's do that.
Or you get a year's sabbatical.
Exactly, and you go do that. And the last one here, the step is not optional, but the questions you ask yourself are. This is the reorient step. Critical self-evaluation. What am I aiming towards? Have I moved towards that this week? You may have different questions when you evaluate yourself. My questions are, well, what went right this week? What went well? I had to move between 3 different apartments this week. What went right is I wrote the name where the thing must go on the box. I thought that was genius. What went wrong, for instance, is the apartment that I'm moving into, I could have written which room the stuff should go in. Because what I ended up with was a room full of boxes. I didn't know where my food was, where my clothing was. Alright, so I can do a little better, but now I have that note. I've revised that. Have I learned any lessons from this past week? And I make notes in Evernote. For this critical self-evaluation, what the step actually is it's a journaling step. You can do that however you like, right? Again, I recommend, I have an area called personal development in my Evernote, where I think about things, how to improve as a person, and in there I journal with a date. These are the lessons I learned from this past week. Now, I want to mention at this stage that all of this complexity is captured in checklists. I don't remember any of them. If you work through your checklist and talk to one, you're not going to want to. I myself get my weekly reviews done about once every 2 weeks. So I'm going to talk to you about some of the things you can do to make actually doing the things you know you should do easier. And the next. I really despise this word life hacks, but it's the common parlance. So we're going to talk about life hacks, and the idea here is I'm going to talk some tips about setting tasks and projects, and then some tips about getting yourself to do the stuff you should do. The first one here is about projects, and it really is about not missing the forest for the trees. When you're deciding on projects and you're picking a goal for the project, focus on the outcome you want, not the task you want to complete. A bad goal for my dissertations project would be examine 3 dissertations. That's a bad goal because that's a task. A good goal would be my 3 students have submitted their dissertations. That's an outcome, that's an output. So when you think about projects, think about the desired outcome, because those will dictate the actual tasks that you do. Whereas if you focus on a task, right, you get those confused, you might do earlier steps that you didn't need to do, or that task might not be related to the result that you want. So think about outcomes when you think about projects. I'm going to step here to goals, although we haven't spoken about goals yet. That's what I'm going to talk about in the very last slide. But I want to differentiate between projects and goals. Goals from your longer time horizon that don't currently exist in the system anywhere. I'll talk about that on the next slide. But I want to emphasize here the idea of self-directed goals. A life that is lived in a goal-setting fashion, where you say, I'm going to do that thing, and then you do it or you don't do it. That has pros and cons. You're going to get some stuff done. When you succeed, you'll be happy very briefly, but then what? And when you fail, you'll be unhappy fairly briefly, but then what? So a way that you should set goals, if you're going to set them, a way to think about them is to make them value-based or process-based. If I want to be, I love riding horses. I don't, I'm going to say, let's say I loved riding horses. I don't actually even like horses. I think they're just horse-shaped snakes. It's a really terrible animal. But let's say I loved riding horses. If I made my goal, I want to be a world championship jockey, right? I have set myself up for failure by that goal because I'm 120 kilos and I'm 6'4". I think the largest jockey in the world is the size of my left leg. Okay, I think that's what's up. But I can make that goal process-based. I can say, well, what I really want to do is ride horses every weekend. And no one can stop you from doing that. The world can stop you from playing in the NBA championships. And by the world, I just mean your genetics and your circumstances. But no one can stop you from playing basketball. So when you choose your goals, make them process-based, things I'm going to do, or make them value-based. I'm going to be the most honest person I can be. Those happen to be good goals also because they don't really stop. You don't achieve them and then be done. You can probably always be more honest than what you are right now. So if that's a value of yours, you can set that as a goal. And that's really changed how I think about things that I'm trying to accomplish. Be like Gandalf. So this is about creating rituals. And because I'm an RPG geek, I think rituals, I think wizard, and I think Gandalf is the canonical wizard. So doing your daily checklist, right, and doing your weekly review can be tough. You've got a lot of stuff on your plate. So what you want to do is make a little ritual around it. You do it at the same time every day, you sit at the same place, you listen to the same music. So that all those things prompt you into doing it. Okay, I find that it's very helpful. I do my daily checklist when I boot up my computer at work. Then I do my daily checklist. Right? And I tend to listen to Sweet Child of Mine. But you get your own ritual around doing these things, and they reinforce the habit. I find that's a very good thing to do. And if you can associate the habit with something you like, Sweet Child of Mine, one of the greatest rock songs of all time, makes the ritual easier to do. And then lastly, discipline over motivation. There's a very good book called The War of Art, right? Which is about essentially overcoming internal resistance to doing creative pursuits. And he makes the distinction, or she, I'm sorry, I can't remember who wrote it, makes the distinction that the difference between amateurs and professionals is professionals show up regardless of how they feel. That's the difference. So ultimately, you don't want to be relying on motivation to do the stuff that you need to do, right? You have to rely on a little bit of discipline. You have to show up and do it, regardless of whether you want to. So, one of the best advice that I ever got was, I'm not motivated, so I'm just going through the motions. And I was told, well, that's exactly what you should do. Just go through the motions. You don't have to be passionate or excited about it. Just go through the motions and get it done. And that's the last line of defense in doing our weekly review. So, the talk could end here, right? We've covered again how our system works. We've refined a little bit of our inbox processing, and we've added our weekly review. Right? But we're going to go, so the important part of the talk is done. We're just going to go one step further. Just one little step further, but you don't have to do anything on this next slide. I just think it's valuable to keep in mind. What we're going to do is we're going to level up. When you're working on a long-term project, your project probably has milestones at work. Or if you're working on a PhD thesis, you complete chapters or sections of the work. And to see how you're doing, you take a step back, right? And you look at the chapters that you've completed. You look at the milestones that you've checked off, and you go, okay, are all those chapters going to make it into the final thesis? Do I need to do something a little bit different? But to do that, you have to take a step back, away from the work that you're currently doing, and look at the completed project, the project completed so far as a whole. Now, this is a bit of a problem when it comes to your life. Let's say you're trying to do something with your life, which can be as grand as taking people to Mars, right? Or as equally valuable as saying, well, I'm actually just not going to cause harm, which is a perfectly good life goal to make. Say, I'm just not going to hurt other people. There's no way for you really to take a step back and see how that's going, unless you start doing your weekly reviews. If you do your weekly reviews, what's happening is you're building some content that tells you, well, this week I did this. Todoist is already tracking all of the tasks, and your archive is tracking all of your projects that are finished, right? So you have this notebook that contains your weekly reviews, you have this archive that tells you the projects that you finished, and you have this completed task list that tells you all the tasks that you completed. So my recommendation is we take one further step back and you do a monthly review. Now you can look at the big project, which is your life. What am I actually doing? Right? So in the monthly review, we have a checklist, but it only has 3 items and they're all review items. That's it. The first item is, I want to look at my areas where I have set standards for myself and ask myself, well, am I meeting those ongoing standards? Or have my responsibilities changed? Have I thought that was an area, but that's not really an area? I want to redirect my areas here. And when I redirect my areas, I may need to make changes to my schedule, to my projects, my tasks. All of that is connected to these areas of responsibility where I feel I have to maintain some standards. The next monthly thing is where I talk about goals. Okay? So far goals haven't appeared anywhere. Because to me, goals are slightly long-term things, and we've spoken about goals in the sense of not achieving a single outcome, but rather be committed to aiming in some direction. What you want to do is you want to take your goal list, whatever they are, might be outcomes, might be trying to do something, and you want to take a project list, right? And you want to draw lines from each project that's connected to a goal. And this is central idea number 3. If you remember only the first 2 central ideas, that's fine. But central idea number 3 is this. If you have a goal that's not connected to any projects, it's a dream. That's what it is. And if you have projects that aren't connected to goals, that's a hobby. That's the distinction. Projects that aren't driving forward some life-affirming thing that you're trying to do are just hobbies. Nothing wrong with hobbies. I highly encourage you to have hobbies. But it's important to distinguish between them. And the same with goals and dreams. Nothing wrong with having dreams, right? But if you want to be a fiction writer, and you actually want to be one, there better be tasks that are arising out of that goal. And if they're not, well, it's a dream. And once a month you should take stock of that. That's what I recommend. Reviewing your goals, comparing your goal list to your project list. Also, this once a month we do the someday maybe list. Let's say you've done really well in your projects, more new projects haven't arisen organically, you're looking for stuff to do, you go through your someday maybe. Maybe stuff is lying around there that you've left for someday, well now is someday. Someday is not some indeterminate point in the future, someday is actually once a month. Once a month you ask yourself, is today that day? Do I take on this project now? Something that I want to say about this is, when people talk about personal development and they talk about goal setting, an essential feature of goal setting is you can have this very grand, ambitious goal, but you have to break it down into baby steps. This system does that automatically. That is what's happening here. I have projects connected to my goals, often more than one project, and those projects have been broken down into next physical actions, which are easy little baby steps for me to chain together. So that's the one thing that we get for free out of the system if we add monthly reviews, which now include goals. They elevate us from the day to day. I really like this tweet. My 3-year-old said she wanted to be an astronaut, and I said she had to study hard, go to college, learn a lot of science, and take a physical fitness test. And she shrugged and said, that's just 4 things. And I really think that that's a very good approach to take a look at the very large stuff that you want to do. Maybe break it down into 4 things. Each of those 4 things might have a couple of projects in them, but each project only has one next action. And you have to do that action. Last thing I want to say here, this is from BoJack Horseman. I don't know if you guys watch BoJack Horseman, it's really great. BoJack Horseman is sort of he used to be a sitcom star. Now he's dealing with the fact that he's no longer famous, and mostly what he does is drink and watch reruns of his old sitcom. And in this episode he goes for a run. And he does like a narration of his internal monologue, which is just as he's running up this hill about how life is terrible and this is terrible and everything is terrible. And eventually he just falls down, lies down on the grass. And the jogging baboon, who doesn't have a name in the series, it's just a baboon that jogs past. Right? The jogging baboon goes to him and says, it gets easier. Every day it gets a little easier, but you've got to do it every day. That's the hard part. But it does get easier. And then the next panel, BoJack just goes, okay, and he gets up, keeps running. So the whole point of these 2 seminars is that life has become much more complex than it's been at any point in history. We want to manage that complexity, but we want to do more than that. We want to make sure that the stuff we want to get done, right, the way we're facing, doesn't get lost. And the way to do that is with simple daily disciplines. Any questions? Yeah.
Ralph, is there any utility in trying to separate work and your personal life?
I haven't found it to be. So some people make that argument, and what you can do, and I don't talk about this here, is you can, in your to-do-list, you can have context tags. So the context tag might be at home, at work, at grocery store. Then when you arrive somewhere, you get, show me everything that's context at home, or show me everything that's context at work. I found that the work required to add context to stuff, I wasn't getting that back from my system. Yeah, that's what I found. Mainly, I think also it's the nature of my work. I'm always working on my laptop, so if I have my laptop, I can do most things that I have to do. But if you had a job that you could only do at a certain location, it might be worth separating out this context.
Or maybe a job that you only want to do at a certain location.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you don't want that stuff to filter up, right?
I mean, I'll give you an example. I mean, it's just a trivial thing. I don't have any of my work email forwarded to my phone.
Yep.
So my phone has nothing to do with the university data.
Yep, and I think that's a very good distinction to make. I don't run my checklists on weekends.
Right.
On Friday I check them, and then I go, is there something that has to happen this weekend? If there is, okay. But usually, I get it done on the Friday. The system switches off till I wake up on Monday. The only thing that does happen is things go into my inboxes. Someone says, hey, did you remember? I just add it to my inbox. But I don't process anything on the weekend. That's done now, I'm not doing different stuff. Right? If I had personal projects that I wanted to work on the weekend, So right now all my projects are work-related, doing work-related stuff, but if I have personal projects, it might be worthwhile for me to separate the context so that only those come up. And that can be done in Todoist directly. I wouldn't recommend you do it in Evernote or Google Drive, just your tasks. Just separate that out. Any other questions? Thoughts, comments, productivity? In 3 weeks, we're going to talk about knowledge management. And what that's going to be about is all the stuff that you've accumulated in your Evernote. How do you make that work for you? Not just go put it up when you need it to do. How do you actually collate that in a way that gives rise to ideas so that you can do research and other stuff? That's what we talk about in 3 weeks. All right, thank you very much.
Cool.